A trade war between the US and China would hurt both sides. Which weapons could China use to fight against US in a trade war? How the global production chain be affected with initiation of US-China trade war? What would be the major impacts of US-China trade war on each countries? Is China really worried about possible trade war by US? GS Paper 2, Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries. What is the context about? China exports more to the US than the US exports to China. That makes US President Donald Trump furious, so furious, in fact, that he may be willing to start a trade war over it. Trump has leveled tough protectionist threats against China. A trade war would undoubtedly hurt both sides. But there is reason to believe that the US has more to lose. Which weapons could China use to fight against US in a trade war? China could stop purchasing US aircraft, impose an embargo on US soybean products, and dump US Treasury securities and other financial assets. Chinese enterprises could reduce their demand for US business services, and the government could persuade companies not to buy American. The bulk of numerous Fortune 500 companies' annual sales come from China nowadays, and this could be worse affected. A trade war could thus cost the US millions of jobs. If China switched from Boeing to Airbus, for example, the US would lose some 179,000 jobs. Reduction in US business services would cost another 85,000 jobs. Soybean-producing regions could lose some 10% of local jobs if China halted imports. How the global production chain be affected with initiation US-China trade war? Today, 80% of global trade comprises international supply chains. Declining trade costs have allowed firms to splinter their production lines geographically, with goods processed and value added in multiple countries along the chain. If China threw a handful of sand in the gears of these chains, it could disrupt entire production networks, doing serious damage to the US. What would be the major impacts of US-China trade war on each countries? An escalating trade war, with each side erecting symmetric import barriers, would fuel inflationary pressure in the US, potentially driving the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates higher and faster. That, together with diminished growth prospects, would depress equity markets, and declining employment and household income. This could lead to a sizable loss of gross domestic product, GDP, in both the US and China. The trade confrontation between the US and China will also affect bilateral investment flows. The US may cite national security concerns to block Chinese investments. Is China really worried about possible trade war by US? Even if a trade war does happen, China's leaders assume it probably would not be sustained for long, given the income and job losses that both sides would suffer. In any case, they have no intention of sending any signal of weakness to a leader so intent on testing the other's limits. For the past 5 years, China has sought to establish a growth model that is less reliant on exports and more reliant on domestic consumption. If this happens, China may actually emerge from the era of Trump better off than before.